Hi. Hey, Yashu's back. Awesome. I hope it's working now. Hey, Yashu, are you having trouble joining? I hope it's working. Yay! Second time's the charm.
Hi, can y'all
Hi.
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we good, we good, we good.
Yay! Yes, we good. So today the topic of Desi Talk is sex education, but it's more about resources and like how we view sex education and what does that mean and what goes on around it. Right, Yashu?
Absolutely. Today's going to be a really informative, deep conversation about incidents which have happened and how we as people can be more proactive when it comes to the resources we have and how important sex education is, right? And by sex education, we mean being aware of the risks that you have when it comes to having sex, being forced into sex, and other situations which might arise from it, right? As pleasurable and amazing as sex can be, there are a lot of risks that come with it, and that's what today's episode is all about. Are you excited, Srishti?
I am excited. And obviously, we are good. This whole series is culminating to something Yashu's talked about a few times, which is her sex education class. And that sex education class will be more about communication while you're having sexual experiences and what it means. But you should definitely look forward to it because I'm sure it'll be amazing and I hope to attend. The other thing is follow India.Currents if you haven't already, and follow the Yashu Rao if you haven't already. I'm assuming you might have followed one of us, but it would be great if you follow us because then we can actually give you information that you want. So definitely comment so we know, what your thoughts are on sex education. So starting off, what do you want to talk about, Yashu?
Starting off, I kind of want to ask everyone a question, and we talked about this question last time, which was how many of our parents have actually had this conversation about sex and sexual practices, consent and what it means to, allow someone to be in your sacred space and then also at the same time not allow someone to be in there. I know for a fact that a lot of the Desi communities don't really talk about sex in general, but let alone sex education. And so today we really want to talk about why that's important. And it's a moment, especially for the youth, right? Because as we get older and maybe some of us are already parents or we're new parents or we're going to be parents one day, it's important for us to start thinking about, well, am I going to allow my child to get this education from an external source like school? Or am I not going to allow my child to get that because I don't believe that that's appropriate? Or am I going to be proactive and have this conversation, even though it's something that might not be something I can relate to, right? Like my parents never had this conversation, so I can never go back and be like, this is how my mom told me about it, So that's what we're going to talk about today. But just to give people some perspective, right? A lot of times, we talk about how in India, right, just to give perspective, like how sex education is banned and, you can't have it, you can't do it. While that's very true to a certain extent, especially in the last, we see this kind of like change over the past couple of decades with the health minister in India and how they've been really dealing with sex education. I think it's important to say that Narendra Modi, who is the Prime Minister of India, definitely made steps towards providing healthy sex education by releasing a program in 2018. And because of this particular program in 2018 that was released, especially because of the rise of HIV in India, I think it's so important to say that you can you can learn about sex education if you are in India, or if you have a relative in India and you want to pass this information on, you can get that information. I believe they have like a 22-hour training program. So that's really helpful for you just to get some information, as well as resources through social media nowadays, right? Of course, you've got like porn and like other types of like YouTube tutorials, like how to put a condom on and stuff like that. But then externally, other than that, for example, the sex workshop that I will be hosting on Saturday, January 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, that I hope everyone will be coming to. It's an opportunity to also learn about, well, what is okay and what is not okay when it comes to consent, and, you know, how to have conversation, how to initiate a conversation with someone without pressuring them, or say you as a woman are interested in someone, right? So there's so much to education, and we just kind of want to touch on some of the resources which are available. Which brings me, you know, Srishti, I want to ask you a quick question here. Like, again, how did you learn about sex education? Is that a resource you got from school? Or was this something you read about in your biology textbook? Like, how do you think you really learned about sex?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think we talked about it a little bit last time. You know, in 5th grade, like, we definitely had like the preliminary education on what's, you know, menstruation and all that. And in 5th grade, you don't understand what any of that means, right? But then, like, you take, you know, sex education in 8th grade, and I had to fight to let my parents let me take that class because they didn't want me to. And I didn't want to write. I was like, you know, I don't want to write an essay every time I miss class, because that was kind of like the trade-off that they'd given you. It's like you have to write about something else. I can't remember what, but I was like, you're going to make me write an essay when I could just go to this class and probably get an A. Like, you know, I use the academic angle to get myself into sex ed. And so I definitely felt like I learned some amount, definitely in 8th grade. I mean, that said, I didn't really have any understanding of sexual relationships. We didn't talk about consent, but we did talk about rape culture, and, like, you know, the statistic at the time, which now is like more than 10 years old, was that 1 in every 4 women is raped. And I remember this kid in my class going, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to be raped. And I was like, it's so hard to have a conversation like that with an 8th grader, because they're not sensitive. They don't understand what it means. Like, it's, you know, and having said that, like, a lot of women have experienced these things. I know we've both experienced similar things regarding, like, you know, not consenting to sexual experiences, or, you know, there's a variety of things that can happen under that umbrella, right? So I don't know how much you want to disclose, but I know that, like, I personally have been in situations where I never consented, and I ended up having to be in them and feeling uncomfortable. And I blamed myself for a very long time because I thought it was my fault, or I thought that, like, I did something wrong, or, you know, I was drinking or whatever. There were so many reasons why I thought those things happened to me because I had caused them. And I actually, like, completely, I cut it out of my memory. So, like, mental health and sexual assault, or mental health and sex, are two things that go hand in hand. If you don't have healthy sexual practices, then obviously your mental health will deteriorate or will be impacted by that. And that's true for even not a super traumatic incident, but, like, if you're in an unhealthy relationship or a toxic one, that's going to impact you negatively. And people don't really think about it like that. So I definitely think that, like, having gone through those experiences and not really knowing, like you said, where did I learn? And I really just learned just by being in it, and, like, being in bad situations and then being in good ones, and knowing the difference between a good and a bad situation. And then, like, unfortunately, I had to go through the bad to get to the good, and shouldn't be everyone's experience. But I think that's how I learned. Like, I knew, okay, like, I don't want to do these things. I don't feel comfortable in this scenario now. I know that I will never hang out with that person. But, like, I think you brought up a good point when we were talking before, like, prior to this live, which was, like, sometimes you're in a situation where you might have said no, and it's still happening, and you still blame yourself, right? Like, where you still feel like, or people will victimize you or victim blame you, whatever, because they're like, well, you already knew this about this person, so why'd you still do that thing? And it's like, just because you know, like, there's such a, it's so nuanced, like, what does consent mean? And it's hard to, like, I don't even know if that could be taught in full breadth in, like, one class, right? Like, you have to kind of, it's situational. Sorry, I just monologued. You tell me.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right, right? And there's a quote that says, sex education is about life skills. Literally, sex education is about life skills. Like, you have to, I feel like a lot of situations, you have to, like, understand the body language, understand what's happening. Like, you have to read in between the lines. Like, there's so much ambiguity and space for error, right? Space where something can be misconstrued. And then at the same time, spaces where you literally don't know what's happening. You don't know how you feel. Like, you don't know if you want it or you don't want it. And those are very real. And a lot of people don't realize this. Like, you could be in a sexual situation. Your lady parts are like, yes, just do it. And then your mind is like, this person's awful. Like, I don't want to give myself up to this person. Like, I don't want this person in my life. What do you do if you're in that conflict? That is a very real conflict. And actually, a lot of us go through that. So that's why it's very important to understand what it means to have sexual control, right? And that's why, like, learning and even to some extent practicing abstinence is a super helpful thing. I remember I went on a sexual fast earlier this year for a month, right? Just to be like, let me see, like, for me to educate myself, like, what does it mean for me to control my bodily functions? Like, sometimes we don't even realize it, right? Men and women. So giving yourself that chance, 1 month, like, 1 month I'm not going to have it, 2 months I'm not going to have sex, right? And then at the same time, and then there's also people who I know, like, 13 years haven't had sex in 15, 20 years, right? So there's so many different ways that you can actually test out your skills. There's actually someone who I follow, and I guess he's like a sexologist, right? So he's been celibate for almost, like, I think he said, like, 20 years or something, but he's actually a sexologist. So he studies sex. So I learn a lot of my like, you know, knowledge about sex through watching his videos, and then him talking about the biology of things, the physiology of things. And yet this man is, you know, hasn't had sex in years, right? So I think there's a lot of, like, ambiguity. So really learning about yourself, understanding yourself. I feel like I'm very aware of myself, my body, and my mind when it comes to sex. But even I have been in situations where I just was like, what just happened? Like, what? What? Did I just consent that? But because I kind of did, but then I kind of didn't also. So there are spaces like that. But with that being said, I'm about to throw a really interesting fact with you guys. In the past decade, we have been in a situation in this country, in America, where only 13 states in this country required sex education that was medically accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're leaving up a lot of room for horny teenagers and to make their own interpretations when it comes to health literacy, right? 13 states out of 50 states, like, that's crazy. And that too, like, to know that accuracy, right? So just to give people perspective, right? And I love sharing this story. When it comes to, like, STIs, right? STIs, STDs, and stuff like that. Like, people freak out. Like, they don't want it. Yet, people be like, I want to go raw. I don't want to wear a condom, right? So what is it that you're trying, like, do you understand what an STD is? It really makes you question. And it makes you think, like, is this person using logical, critical thinking, right? So kind of going back to that quote, sex education is about life skills. Like, you have to use your critical thinking. Now, with that being said, I kind of want to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about, like, culture and Indian culture, especially with the rise of having a lot of Indian kids, children, students coming from India to America to study, right? We see this like a lot of people who are migrating to America for their education, their master's degrees, their PhDs, whatever. And a lot of them are exploring for the first time sex, and especially sex in other communities, right? I know like a lot of times when new master students come from India or from, Desi countries, like, they get on the Tinder, they get on the Tinderoni, and they swiping and stuff. But I'm very proud of it, right? Have become a resource, like, especially like, for example, right here, the university that I'm at right now, right? Like, where I get people hitting me up like, hey, like, and these are people from India who came here, like, I just had sex with this like white dude, and I don't know, like, do you think I have an STD? Where I'm in situations like that where it hit me like, clearly this person doesn't know, so let me take the step to kind of educate them to let them know. And the worst thing is that, like, people can be put into situations where first of all, they don't know what they're walking themselves into, right? Culturally speaking. And then it would suck if you walk into a bad situation, and a lot of times it's your first time. Statistically speaking, most of the people who come from, for example, India, and they migrate here, statistically speaking, are still virgins, right? Even when they come here to America. So for a lot of them, if they do explore their sexuality in America because they have more freedom, it's the first experience for a lot of them. So it's so important to really understand what's happening. Do you feel like that's true? Like, do you feel like, in places that you've been in, that you've seen people really just like not even know what STDs are, or like, culturally speaking, like, have you met people who are from India or from Bangladesh or from Desi countries who are just like, oh wow, like, I don't know anything about this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting because I think depending on where you are in India, you have a very different relationship with sex and what sex means and online dating and all of that, because I know the cities in India, there is more of it's more westernized. So like a lot of my cousins live in Delhi, and that said, they dated on, my cousin, actually my younger cousin, had boyfriends before I ever even thought about, dating and all that. But interestingly enough, even though she tried Tinder, and I think she like very much sexually explored, and like maybe she was a little bit more open-minded, but from what I could tell with her friends in Delhi, like, they were like more open to a lot of things. And then the ones that didn't know as much were probably the ones that never, like, were from smaller villages and communities where that kind of access to information didn't exist. But now with the access to the internet and access to your phone, like, I feel like a lot of those barriers of like not knowing anything, I mean, of course you're never going to know, like we said, a lot of it is doing, but they do have access to Google, and they do have ways to kind of understand or watch TV, and like a lot of things they watch are the things that play here. So they'll get like some amount of cross-cultural understanding of what that means. That says then this like stereotyping, right? Like, if I come to America, all the women here will have sex with me, like that kind of sort of narrative, whereas like in India, you're not. Well, in India, you're not even allowed to kiss in public. So the taboo exists outside the home, and like if you're not married, where are you gonna do it? Where are you gonna do anything, right? So it becomes the barrier to entry is a lot harder. Like, even if you're interested, like, how are you gonna make it happen? Like, I feel like I'm pretty open, but like if I lived in India, I'd just be like, fuck it, I guess like I'll just wait till the time is right, because it's so much extra effort at that point to like go find a space where like now you can have an intimate experience that isn't rushed, that isn't forced, that isn't like all these things. And like, how do you make, you have to create that environment. So I feel like, I do think people know more about sex now, but I think that's still like being a virgin and coming to the United States might be more of like a common thing because of simply the fact that you can't really openly sexually explore in India. And yeah, I think and then also like a lot of my cousins, even if they did date online or did do all these things, all ended up having arranged marriages, every single one of them so far. So that's also like an interesting dichotomy, like the ones that were more adventurous and did want to like, you want to date like not traditionally, and all ended up dating, through their parents at some point. And so like, what does that mean? Like, because you've talked a little bit about like people from India coming here that you've dated, and then them ending up going back and date, like, marrying the person that their parents wanted. Like, culturally, like, there's still so much that isn't explicitly talked about that makes it so difficult for people to actually have narratives in their brains that make sense. And mental health, like I said before, is so important.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here. We got a comment here that says, that's the irony. We are the second most populous country in the world, but we don't like talking about sex. That's absolutely right. And it is very ironic, and it's funny. And I guess we kind of talked about it last time, how, like how you learn about sex is sometimes even like on the day that you're, going to be having sex, like, that the first night or whatever. There's no conversation at all to educate or guide the young ones, and that is really unfortunate. But again, we are seeing changes slowly, especially in countries like India. And if you are of Desi descent, right, that's where you have the opportunity of making an impact on the generations to come, on your children, how you can have those conversations. I have become a resource where I am right now. I have people hitting me up all the time asking me questions. The reason I'm even hosting the sex education workshop is because I'm trying to cater to the Desi population. I'm trying to put myself out there as a Desi source, right? Desi resource to help people navigate through their sexual experiences if you're from a Desi background, and understand what that looks like.
Yeah, and there's also so much fear like involved with, I mean, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, and so I'm like bringing it a little bit back, like what consent and like being in a scenario where you're comfortable, it takes so many different notes. Like, you don't necessarily know how to navigate, especially when you've had no encounters with people that you would want to have sexual experiences with. And I mean, that even comes down to like, maybe you're queer and you can't even explore that. Like, there's so many aspects to sexuality that are so repressed. And like, I don't think that's just in India. I'm not even saying that it's relegated to just India. It exists here. Like, I never, we talked about it last time. Like, I don't think either of us got the talk from our parents about healthy practices or anything like that. So definitely, I think you and I both had some traumatic experiences that initially, that's how our sexual experiences maybe began, because that was the only way we well, not for you, but for me, like, I didn't even know how to in maneuver in a scenario, right? Like, so I was just like kind of like floundering. And at the time, there weren't resources like Yashu to reach out to. There wasn't Google. There wasn't this large narrative about sexual health and practice and mental health and all this that now exists. So I think like already we're like a lot further ahead than we used to be. But I wonder where the gaps are, You seem to be seeing it a little bit more.
Right, and I think this fear thing is very true. How many of you guys growing up as teenagers, right, on your, on your dial-up internet service, were trying to Google, like, what does sex mean or what is porn, but you scared, right? Because your parents are going to find out on the history, which you don't know how to delete, right? Like, I remember once, like, my computer back in the day got a virus or something, and it was a legitimate virus. Like, we clicked on something that was a virus, but I'm pretty sure, like, it was one of those websites that popped up like an actual sex ad, right? Like, I don't know. But, like, when my dad always used to take the computer, because he didn't know anything about computer. He would take the computer to this guy named Bo, and Bo would try to fix our computer, get the virus off of it, fix it. And so I remember once he told my dad, like, yep, there's just like these sex websites, like there's like porn up on here and stuff. And I remember my dad was just like he like looked at me and my sister for a minute, right? And I was like, I swear it wasn't me. I don't even know what that word means,
Yeah, it's happened to all of us. No, I mean, I had scenarios where I didn't even search it up. So I remember going to my friends. This is a random story, but I'm just gonna tell it because I think it illuminates a different aspect to a similar story. Like, basically I went to my cousin's house and we were playing Neopets. I was probably in 8th grade or 7th grade, back when Neopets was a thing. And my cousins were 3 or 4 years younger than me. So we were like playing whatever on the computer, and then we left the computer, and it was like 2 girls. So the 2 girl cousins and then 1 guy cousin. The guy cousin he's a little bit like he was 1 year younger than me, but he didn't like do stuff with us. So he was like doing his own thing, whatever. So this whole, everything, we go about our day, it's fine. We played Neopets, we left. And then my cousin's dad comes over to our house and he's like, why was your daughter on sex.com at our house? And I was like, what? I was on Neopets. Like, I don't even know what sex is, and then I was inclined to believe that your hormonal teenager son, which is perfectly fine, it is allowed. I think as a 12-year-old, if you're like curious and you want to look up porn or boobs or butts or whatever, sex or whatever, like that's fine. I actually think that it's healthy. Like you're like exploring and you're curious. And I talk about this with like my partner a lot. Like, what would you be like? Where would you draw the line? Like, what would you talk to your kid about? And I think them exploring and being curious is fine. It's like drawing the boundaries between that and then like how you interact with people in the real world. Like, how do you have those healthy conversations? But here's why I think this story is interesting is that this man immediately blamed me for whatever reason, because maybe I'm the oldest one there, for doing something like that. Now, I think realistically, out of the situation, we could both agree it's probably the kid, the teenager boy. But the fact that it was such a negative thing to have looked it up and like for it to be in the history, and then it can't be my son. Like, it cannot be my child that's looking up porn at someone else's house. Like, it's definitely that other person's kid. Like, that whole thing, like, now, not only are they shaming me, they're shaming my family. There's a lot of shame on the kid who probably did it and is not going to admit it. Like, he's never going to admit it now that you made it a whole thing. You know what I mean? Like,
the fact that it was shame. The fact that it was shame, right? Like I think about it, like, at the end of the day, we as children have watched porn. Our parents have at some time in their lifetime have watched porn. My children one day are going to watch porn, right? So this stigma that is behind these concepts of like anything related to sex, right?
Can I just tell you like another short story? I think it just exemplifies what you're saying. Is that I remember I was watching this movie with my mom, and it was called, oh my God, I don't remember the name of this movie anymore, but, it's I don't remember the name of the movie, sorry. But the premise of the film actually is that this, like, larger girl gets married to like a very skinny dude or something, and they have like a very fast wedding because of actually something we've talked about where they think this woman can't get married, so they're just trying to marry her off essentially in the movie. I wish I could remember the name. Now, I don't know if the premise of the movie matters or at all. I was just trying to see if you knew the name of the movie. But in the movie, the girl is like, okay, like, I want us to have like a sexy night because this guy doesn't want to have sex with her or whatever, so she rents a porn. And in the movie, they don't show the porn, but they have this scene where like she's rented it, and they basically have like a TV in the room, and they close the door, and then you hear them like watching the porn, kind of, but like not really. And my mom was the one who wanted to watch this movie, so I'd come home from college, and she's like, let's watch this movie together. You're gonna love this movie. And so we're watching the movie, and then it gets to the scene, and she skips like 10 times so that like I don't get to watch it. I must have been like 21. I was like, go back. And she's like, no, I'm not going to go back. And I was like, go back. And she would not go back. And I was like, I want to know what happened. She's like, you know, some things mothers know, like their kids shouldn't know about or something. She said something like that to me. And I was like, I already know what's happening. Let's just watch it. And she's like, I don't want to watch it with you. And I pushed her kind of a lot because I wanted to see what her boundaries were with me. Like, what would she be willing to, like, because it wasn't a sex scene. So I just wanted to see, like, what are you okay with me, like, being around with, or, like, what can we talk about when it comes to sex? And I saw her boundary was really, really, like, her threshold was low for that. And And I almost made her cry, so I knew I pushed her to the point of like making her super uncomfortable. And afterwards, I just realized, like, I think for her, she's just not ready to push her discomfort away to have like a real conversation about something like that, and that is ingrained in her because that is how she was brought up. That's how her parents have been. Like, it's just too hard for her to like break out of that, and to force that is actually like traumatizing for her. Like, it was, you know, like, she just can't view me in that way. And I wonder, like, what are the benefits of your parents viewing you as like somebody that does have sexual experiences? Like, you don't have to like envision it, but like, you know, you've grown up, you're mature. Like, I don't know.
Right.
It's just, I just worry about that. Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's I feel like if you're Desi, okay, if you are Desi and you've experienced, if you have had a parent sexting movie moment, go ahead and drop an emoji,
Yeah.
okay? 'Cause I was like, when you were sharing that story, I thought about the first time I watched a sex scene, a rated R movie with my mom. It was at the theater. It was the movie Troy. The first scene of the movie is Brad Pitt having sex, right? My mom was like, "You brought me to a sex movie?"
You're like, no.
I was like, it was Akka. Akka means older sister. And I was like, it was Akka.
Yeah.
I was like pointing my finger over there, right? And so I feel like at the end of the day, our parents, like, at least in my aspect, right? I think my parents, like, especially with me, my mom knows that I know what sex is. She knows that I'm very vocal about it, and like, you know, like that, and I'll say stuff like, I'll say stupid shit with her all the time just to push her buttons, right? But then I also know that it's like in her head, it's always just been like, that's something you have with your husband. You don't have a husband, hence you shouldn't be talking about these things, or you shouldn't be even knowing what these things are, because those are supposed to only happen when you're married, you know? But because I'm not like that, and I don't know that, and that's not how things are for me. I think for her, like, although it's hard, like, it's not a conversation where I just be like, "Hey mom, I have a guy over." Like, I would never have that kind of conversation. But at the same time, it's like whatever. Like the other day, I was hosting just this virtual event for all my mom and her aunties and uncles and everything. And then I didn't have my video on because I was still like getting ready or whatever. Or I was doing something. I just didn't have my video on. And then one of the uncles is like, "Yashu, like, we want to see you. Why isn't your camera on? Are you hiding a boyfriend in your room?" My mom was so angry. She was so angry. She texted me while we were on the Zoom, like, "Do you have a guy in your room?" No, I don't. And,
but also, whatever if you do, right? Like, but yeah, I get it.
Like, I'm almost 30. Like, woman, I need a man in my room, you know?
Yeah, and it's so funny because, you know, now that you're saying this, I'll actually say, like, our parents, your mom is more comfortable with, like, at least knowing a lot of these, like, you know, things about you that my mom is not comfortable with. But my mom has let my partner stay in my room overnight. Like, both my parents have, like, multiple times. Yes. So I think all parents have weird boundaries.
Right. My parents would.
I know. I think, well, it's usually like a serious partner that they've met multiple times. They'll allow it because of distance or whatever. It is, honestly, I will say, very progressive of them, considering.
I dated a man for 5 years, and when he would come over to visit me, because he was living in a different state, like, my mom would, like, make sure I was upstairs and he was downstairs.
Yeah, she like checks in on both of you before you go to sleep.
And I would wait. I would text him and be like, "All right, I'm gonna come downstairs at like 1 o'clock when my mom's asleep. I will wear socks because I have like creaky hardwood floors in my house, and I would like slide on the hardwood floors and then like tiptoe downstairs to see him. And then I'd be like, "Okay, wake me up at like 3 o'clock in the morning so I can go back upstairs." You know?
Oh my God, that's dedication, dude. That's dedication.
You're a committed, loyal partner.
You're a committed partner, man. Yeah, you are. I love that for you. But also, I mean,
one more story.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this one is really funny too, and I want to know if anyone else has been in a moment like this, right? Desi parents and sex toys.
Oh God. I can't imagine this one going well at all.
It's the funny part. My parents have like traumatized me in this. Not my parents, my mom. Like my dad is completely out of the question here, okay? Dad is like not even here, okay? But I remember my sister, she had her like 20-somethingth birthday, or whatever. It was like something, and someone, like one of her girlfriends or something, gave her a dildo. Okay?
Oh,
My sister was like, what the fuck? Like, what do I do with this? So she took it and she hid it in the basement, like somewhere, like in a box, like in this like she hid it there. Now fast forward a couple of years, okay? Like maybe like 2 years, right? I was helping my mom clean out the basement, right? We were like getting rid of old shit, getting rid of like old furniture and whatever, and then of course my mom was like cleaning this box, and she just like pulls the thing out, and she looks at it. She's like, "What is this?" Right? She like looks at it.
She has no idea, dude.
No idea,
Our moms have never masturbated. I am 100% sure of it.
I completely agree, which is why, guys, sex education workshop. We talking about masturbation and different ways you can do masturbation, both men and women. Be sure you can attend Saturday, January 30th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Be sure to attend. But coming back to the story, my mom's like, "What is this?" Right? And I was just like, "Mama, just put it back where you got it." Because at this point, I'm like, I don't even know if it's been used. It hasn't been, like, we don't know where that thing has been, right? So I'm like,
she's like waving it around like a wand.
Remote. I'm like, no. It's like, put it down. Just put it down. And then I think it clicked for her, and she was just like, "Oh, Yashu, and she like yells at me. I'm like, "What? It's not mine." She's like, "It's yours." And I'm like, "No, it's not mine. It's Akka's."
Oh my God.
It is yours.
Damn, you threw your sister under the bus like that? You threw her.
My mom wouldn't believe. Till this day, my mom says it's yours. And my sister goes to me and she goes,
"That's a bad older sister."
My sister throws me under the bus for everything, okay? So, hell no. I was like, "It's Akka's." And my mom is like, "She would never do this. It is you."
You're like, of course she would. She's the older sister. Every Didi, every Akka ever has definitely played their younger sibling hard. Like, that's unfair.
Right. And so I was like, what the fuck? And that traumatized me to the point where I never, ever was, I never bought a sex toy in my life, right? Never bought one until finally, like now I'm 28, and then my girlfriends bought, that was my birthday gift. They bought me like a little bullet, and they're like, "Yashu, because of your traumatizing story, we got you a bullet." I still haven't opened it out of the package. It's
You got to. You've got to. You don't even know what you're missing out on.
Right,
That said, yeah, you should definitely open. Wait, did your birthday just happen?
It was in August.
Oh, wait. We're very close in birthdays, aren't we? Because I'm the 11th and you're like something after me. You're like,
I'm the 23rd, August 23rd.
Okay. Nice. We're both August babies.
Yes, we are. But
cool.
But yeah. But anyway, we need to come back to like a little bit more serious now, right?
Yeah.
Just for this conversation, and with this, I think we're going to wrap up the conversation because we're definitely over time. But of course, these stories were hilarious. I can see a lot of laughing emojis. Thank you, Ajay, for contributing with the emojis. We appreciate it. But coming back a little bit, I do want to talk about this. And this is for both the Indian community, Desi community, and America, India, wherever. It is so important that you are educated on sexual practices, sexual consent, and all of these things, because it may not be you, but it could be someone that you love, or it could be you being the offender without even you realizing it. So it's so important that you understand these things and you talk. If you don't know, if you legitimately are like, wait, I don't really get it, you need to talk to someone like myself, Srishti, India Currents, DM us, talk to someone so you can learn about it. Ain't nothing wrong in you saying, "Hey, I've never really talked about sexual consent. Can you tell me?"
Yeah, and I think oh, sorry, just to interject into what you're saying. Also, it's okay to have done something that might have been inappropriate and apologize for it and move forward. Because I feel like in society today, we haven't created like a rehabilitation program for people that potentially have offended or have done something wrong. And I want to put it out there that you don't have to be that person for the rest of your life, right? Like, if you didn't know and now you're learning and you're educating yourself, that's all anyone can ever ask for. And owning up to it and actually sincerely apologizing is what makes all the difference. Saying that it didn't happen, saying that, oh, you feel bad for the person that it happened to, or that, like, you know, or like victim blaming or trying to deflect, like, no offense, but like, sorry, I'm going to go on another tangent, but I loved Aziz Ansari, like, loved Aziz Ansari. And I've been watching his stand-up since before it was just on YouTube. Like, no one knew who he was. And now, like, I don't know if you knew what happened, but Aziz Ansari basically, you know, got called out for going on this first date where the girl was uncomfortable and he did some things that were weird. And honestly, that story was not that, like, shocking. I was just kind of like, sounds like a bad first date where he didn't pick up on whatever signal she was putting out. And that happens. But, like, acknowledging it, just saying sorry and being like, shit, I fucked up. Like, I should educate myself more on this topic. That's all I wanted from him. But I watched his stand-up after the fact where he addressed it, and he was just kind of like, well, you know, I'm sorry if she felt that way. I'm sorry if she misunderstood what I thought, or like, you know, like, it was like a lot of like, I'm sorry if you felt. And it's like, you know what? The person felt that way regardless of whether or not you intended for it to. So you have to apologize genuinely, and you have to, like, know that you can grow from that. And I don't know how you feel about that, Yashu, but, like, I think you need to create, like, a space for this open dialogue that you've actually started, where, like, you've maybe made a mistake and you can still, like, learn from it, right? Like, I think that's good to put out there.
I think you brought up such a good topic, because, and this is why all of y'all better be following India.Currents and joining us for Desi Talk. Last week, we talked about people messaging, sliding into DMs and saying disrespectful things to people. 2 people who watched our live, who one of them had actually messaged me and slid into my DMs and said certain things, messaged me apologizing.
That's awesome.
Said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I was very eager to talk to you because I look up to you, but I didn't know it was coming. It might have come off like me being like overly, you know, like being overly pressuring you or whatever. But anyway, long story short, this person apologized. And the first thing I said was, I forgive you and we cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I sent him an invitation to this, you know, the sex workshop. I said, you should definitely come in because I know you have a girlfriend. So this might be a really good opportunity for you to learn. I'm hosting it right before February comes in so y'all can prepare for Valentine's Day. Like, just showing you guys how having this Desi Talk open dialogue has brought change. If we can bring change in one person, we've done our job. And we saw that just based off of last episode. So what you're saying is absolutely right. Just by talking about it, it's so valuable. Mm-hmm. And we have a comment here. I had the same exact take on that. In fact, I wrote an article about it in 2017 along the same lines. Be sure to share the article with us. You know, tag us in the article. If you repost it, you can tag me, the Yashu.
Surabhi is an India.Currents writer, actually. So thank you, Surabhi. I hope that you write about it. I think you didn't write for me for that one, but I would love to have like a new fresh perspective on it, like, you know, what's going on in the world with that. Also, Surabhi, DM me or send me another email and I will definitely take a look at it. But yeah, Surabhi writes good content. Check out what she writes. She talks a lot about being Indian in a foreign land and what accompanies that, putting that out there for you, Surabhi. But yeah, I totally agree. I definitely want you to tag us so I can read what you wrote.
For sure. But just to come back here so we can wrap it up real quick, I want to talk about the importance of sex education, especially if you are located in like a Desi country, or you are from a Desi country and now you're in America, or you're from a Desi family, or anything, right? It's so important because right now with this push of westernization, right, especially like we talked about this earlier, me and Srishti, but you know, in India, we have this push of westernization. Everyone is on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and whatnot. People are on this bandwagon. I need to have a boyfriend. Remember, you said it. Like, all of your cousins had boyfriends, and you didn't even explore that word. We have this real push culturally to get on this whole boyfriend bandwagon, girlfriend bandwagon. And that has resulted a lot of times in a lot of situations. And, you know, I'm about to talk about something kind of hard, but it hits home for me because I saw my brother cry about it, because he just related to it in the sense that, like, this many people were affected by it. You know, just being a man, he just was like, I'm sorry for women, and he cried about it. So this story is very near and dear to my heart. But in South India, where, again, South India, in a village that is not very, again, it's in those communities that don't have a lot of sex education programs and this and that. But anyway, we saw, you know, this incident that took place, a sexual assault, you know, case that had happened, where people were kind of targeting these undergraduate women, students, whatever. You're my girlfriend, so you need to come see me and visit me and spend the night with me, and this and that, and putting people basically in like vulnerable situations. And then as a woman, right, you know, listening and going with it. A lot of times we are in a systematic society that says, like, it's never the victim's fault. But at the same time, there's another side to it, right? It can also be the victim's fault to a certain extent. No one asks for it, I get it, but also if you know, like, wait, this person has been, like, I know that this person has been charged with this, or I know this person has previously assaulted my friend or touched my friend inappropriately, then knowing these things, why are you going to test the waters, right? Again, it's not your fault 100%. Of course not. No one asked for it. But at the same time, if you know your intuition is telling you this is bad, then I tell you, listen to your intuition. But anyway, long story short, about 200 women were speculated to be caught in this, you know, sexual assault case that had happened. And it was truly very sad and very traumatizing, because these people were blackmailing them, videotaping them, and then releasing the videotapes on Facebook, on Instagram, and it was just really sad, because people now on the internet were like hearing these women beg for their lives, begging and saying, please let me go, please let me be, right? And so it's really sad. And the reason it even happened and it takes place a lot of times is because we're not educated. We're not taking that time to create awareness, to know that, okay, just because there's this cultural push to have a boyfriend doesn't mean you just hit up some guy on Facebook, right? Right now, as a mental illness mentor, right, one of the jobs that I have is currently, like, you know, working with people who may have a disability like autism or something. They have a social disability, right? But then they still have their bodily functions. They still go through puberty and everything. And then we have people trying to take advantage of them because they don't have social skills, taking advantage of disabled people because they don't have social skills. You have to send me a picture of you naked, or I'm never going to talk to you again. Someone who might have autism will not receive that. They will say, okay, I'm sending it to you immediately, because all they understand is punishment, but not critical thinking. So the world is an unsafe place. You have to go with that. You have to, unfortunately, you have to go with the mindset of understanding that this world does have unsafe and evil spaces, but you can avoid it and be on top of it by educating yourself. And even by being educated, I am educated, and yet, and that's what I was telling Srishti, like, I went through something very recently where I felt violated, right? So it's like, you can be extra cautious. Sometimes even me being so vocal and open and honest about things and educating things can come against me. And that's what our Desi parents a lot of times fear, because if I'm talking about sex, then I'm a object of sex. that's what society kind of becomes, right? And that's what our parents fear, and that's why a lot of times we're sheltered. So that's it. I'm done. I'm done. But I needed to educate people and tell people about that because it is real, it is scary, it is uncomfortable, but it's facts. So that's
yeah. It's a pretty traumatic story, and it's unfortunate that that's probably not an isolated story, and you know, it happens all over the world, and it's unfortunate that women have to bear the burden of educating and also dealing with trauma. But that said, I think this conversation hopefully was educational for the people that stayed on it. If you are a Desi person watching this in the US, there is the South Asian Sexual and Mental Health Alliance, and they do a lot of good work on South Asian education around the sexual health and your mental health, how those two things are inextricably linked. And of course, Yashu's having her sex education class, so you should join that. And with that, I'll end this conversation, but thank you all for joining. Follow India.Currents, follow the Yashu Rao. You can follow me on Problems. And see you next week, Yashu, for our next topic, which is gender identity, right?
I'm excited. I'm excited about gender identity. So we want everyone to come out there. If you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, if you've enjoyed these conversations that we've been having on Desi Talk, not only follow us, but hit the little alarm button so you get the notifications when we go live, as well as inviting those near and dear to you, friends and community who you think would benefit from these conversations. Let this information out. The more we educate people, the more valuable, you know, society that we're creating. So be sure you do that, and check us out next week for gender identity, because that is a topic that people get messed up all the time, which is exactly why we're having it. So be sure to tap in, everyone.
Bye, Yashu.
Bye.